Hello, everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to becoming a confident rower who's respected by your peers. You can become the athlete you want to row with. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and I'm joined by my colleague, Marlene Royle.
Hello, Rebecca, and hello, Faster Masters. It's good to be here again.
It certainly is. Rocking up to the end of October. I feel this month has flown past.
Really fast.
Yeah. Now, a quick reminder to everybody and a big thank you. If you're listening to this podcast and what we say is helpful, please consider supporting us. There's a URL on the screen, fastermastersrowing.com/podcast. And donations start at $1 a month, and we are extremely grateful for everyone who supports us. You know who you are, and we've got a little something up our sleeves for you. So if you get in quick, you could be on the receiving end of that, which I'm not going to publicize because it's secret between us and our loyal podcast listeners who are also our supporters. This past week, now, this is the part of the show where we talk about the work that we've been doing to advocate more generally for Masters rowing. And it's been all over the news. We all know last weekend was the Head of the Charles. Woo! It was an amazing regatta. And I personally watched a lot of it streaming on their YouTube channel.
I did too. I think I watched all of it live, because I love listening to the announcers, and it's one way because they read people's biographies. And Dave Vogel, who is a very veteran, famous sculler, Yale coach, they tell so much about everybody who's racing. So it's a great way to sort of get yourself up to date on what's happening in rowing and what's going on at the clubs and the different scullers and, all the cool things they had to say.
And I love the fact it's the athletes who submit those bios, and some of them are hilarious.
I know. Some of them are serious, and then some of them are just complete jokes. But everybody was very happy to be racing, and it was beautiful weather, and it was a new format of covering the regatta. So it was the first time the Head of the Charles had a YouTube channel, and all that. For those who didn't see it, if you just search Head of the Charles on YouTube, you'll come up with the channel, and all of the footage is there that you can go back and watch it.
Yeah, it was just delightful and really professional commentary. I think the camera work could have been improved. There were moments when they cut away way too fast, and they actually showed cameras panning and then panning back, which wasn't very helpful. It didn't make for a good viewing experience. But the first year that Henley Royal Regatta did their live streaming, again, they've made significant improvements since then, and they have a much different course to film than the Head of the Charles. So it's all about learning the territory and what makes for good viewing and what doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And by day 3, I did see that the coverage and how they were changing views had improved a lot from the first day. But the masters, the older masters, the 50 plus up singles were all the first races. So, excuse me, and some of the first race, some of the coverage wasn't that good. I think it improved as it went on, but beautiful views.
Yeah, if you're listening, Head of the Charles, the number one thing you need to change is when you have the graphic displaying the intermediate times and the bow numbers and who's gone through which timing point, put it on the left-hand side of the screen, because we want to see the bows of the racing crews to see who's in front. And that was obscured by that graphic. So that would be my one recommendation. Now, take a look at this. This is the photo of the week from the awesome Cici Aguda. This is from her Facebook feed, and it's her racing in the Head of the Charles. And what you can see in the foreground, I think, is her welly boots. But what you can actually see is she's quite close to another single. And in the air above the sort of thing that looks like a church is the blade of the other sculler as they overlap and cross each other as they're doing the race. And it was just she has a fish eye camera, so it actually gives a very all around view. But I just thought that was the most wonderful photograph, CC. So thank you so much for sharing that.
That was crazy. That was absolutely crazy. There was some, the head of the Charles lived up to its reputation. I mean, some people got through with a clean race, but there were some like serious collisions as always. But Cece crushed it here. I think.
Absolutely. And she got a very good picture of going into the Anderson footbridge, and it looks like she's going right into a tunnel. There's this wonderful arch of the brickwork, which was really, really brilliant. So it was great. I mean, I'm sure they're stills off of her camera, but they were really, really cool. So very, very nice to see. And it's great. Rowing photography is challenging. And I absolutely loved it. So Cece says that the woman rode over her oar. So there we go. Well, at least you were overtaking her. That's the
that's the main thing, right? Go fast, right?
Totally. Rich Weaver joining us from windy Wyoming as well.
Yes, well, I had a good regatta. I mean, meaning athletes that I work with. So I'd like to just give out a shout of congratulations to Chinook Performance Rowing. The women's 50+8 won a gold medal, and that's a team that I work with their training program, and also to Masters Coaching, and they won a gold medal in the women's 70+8. The woman in the bow seat was 88 years old. So, the boat average was 70. So that is absolutely incredible. That is the women's, I think it's the Grand Veterans event. That was quite exciting. And Maureen Harriman, who is a sculler from Whistler, BC, was second in the women's 50+ single. Mac Nash and Bob Reichard, who also rowed with Chinook, were second place by 1.5 seconds in the men's 60+ double, and the women's 4 in the 50+ from East Arm Rowing Club. They also placed second in an extremely competitive race. So, really, really well done, those teams. And for those of you who were Faster Masters athletes, please write to us and tell us how you did. We did see a whole bunch of names there in the results. So we'd love to hear from you and hear how the program worked for you. And, did you feel ready to race and well prepared? So your feedback would be really good for us as we continue to develop our program. And, going fast is what our business is.
It certainly is. And we genuinely read every single email, and we often reply to every single email with individual answers. I got one this week from one of our athletes who talked about in some detail the incidents that happened during the race, which won't surprise anyone who's ahead of the Charles veteran, because it happens. You run up against other crews, you get close, you're steering the buoys, all of that. And we had a very robust discussion about how to take the positive learnings from that and put it into the next race, because they're doing another race. I think, is it the head of the Hooch coming up?
Yep.
So try and string together the good bits of what you've already practiced and put that into effect in a new race. So that was the basic theme there, but we seriously would love to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. So do write to us, tell us how you did. And do mention, we love to read out people's comments and feedbacks on the podcast. So, we would like your permission to do that, which is why we don't just go ahead and do it off the cuff, because, it's better to know that we have your blessing, but we would definitely like to share your experiences with the other people on the podcast and help them get ready we're already getting ready for next year's Head of the Charles. So.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who will have been disappointed and maybe want to review their performance and plan for next year. Now, this week, our podcast is You Ask, We Answer. And this is where we answer questions that people have sent in. So you would have seen that in the newsletter last week, We invited you to send in some questions, and we have some super ones lined up. So let's kick off. The very first question was, I'm going to be doing 2 races in one day. So this is a head race where they have multiple events, one in the morning, one at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What should I do in between those 2 events?
My first question would be, how much time do you have in between events? Because if you're doing one in the morning and one at the end of the afternoon, that's very different than if you have half an hour in between. But what I would advise is, as soon as you finish the first race, put on some dry clothes and get warm, depending on where you're racing. And eat something immediately. I think what you want to focus on in between races is that you've eaten enough, you're recovering, you're fueling after the first race, you're hydrating, you're getting refueled up for the next race. Even if that's not a long period of time, you can eat something that's very easy for you to digest. I know Rebecca has her little secret regatta snacks, which she'll tell you about. And, but getting recovery is the first thing. If it's going to be a long wait, like sometimes you can go back to your hotel room and take a nap and then come back to the course. It depends on how much time you have. But I would always say rest, even if it means going to your car, closing your eyes for 15 minutes, staying dry, staying warm. Try not to talk and socialize a lot, because that takes energy. So, that's my biggest advice is hydration, refueling, go chill out and just relax a little bit until it's time to get ready for the next race.
Yeah, have a helper. So someone who can help you get on and off the water, have them lined up so that you can, be really efficient. You're not hanging around, queuing for things. And with regards to the chilling out in your car, I definitely subscribe to that. Have some nice music, have something that you read. If you do want to do a nap, set an alarm on your phone or your watch, because what you'll find is that there's nothing worse than falling asleep and worrying in your sleep that you won't wake up and you've overslept and you missed your race. So I will go to sleep having set an alarm for 30 minutes, and then you can just be really confident that you don't need to worry. You can, even if you just keep your eyes closed, lie on the back seat of your car, bend your knees up so that you can lie flat on your back. And it just feels nice. Just zone out, have a little chill time. Now, my race snacks, I think, are fruit balls. I personally like pasta with not very much with it, but that's not everybody's choice. And if you really, really can tolerate it, and I would not practice this for the first time on race day, have a massively diluted caffeine drink, a V or a Red Bull, dilute it, so 2-to-1 water to Red Bull. And that can be quite good at sort of getting you feel revved up for that second race. Remember, your second race, you are not going to need as much warm up as your first race. Even if it's a cold day, you will find that your muscles come in much better. So you might want to spend a little of that downtime planning how you're going to attack the race course if there were particular elements that you wanted to do differently. And also, realize that this means that you might be able to adjust your boating time if you don't need quite so much warm up. On the other hand, I do know that there are events where, regardless of what happens, you come off the water at the finish and then you have to row all the way back to the start for the next one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and another point just to consider, even if you're just doing one race, but especially if you're doing 2, if you've got a long row up to the start, like a race like the Head of the Hooch, which is coming up in the Tennessee in the US, the first week of November, it's a long row up to the start against the current, and then you race back down. If you're going to do that twice, it does make for a long day. I had a couple of athletes mention to me during their Head of the Charles race that once they were getting that they started to feel like they were running out of gas a little bit after the Elliott Bridge, which is coming around to the final turn. And one of my first questions to them was, what did you eat in the morning? How well fueled were you? Because if you're feeling like you're kind of running out of gas mid-race, it's probably not a mental training issue. It's probably a refueling issue and an energy availability issue. So make sure that if you've got, if it's been a while since you ate breakfast or lunch, depending what time your race is, during your warm up, take some kind of little snack with you in the boat. It might be just a sport drink that's got some carbohydrate, or a gel if you like that, but you might need that maybe 10 minutes before you start, 5 minutes before you start. A little drink of something, a little bit of carbohydrate might make the difference for that energy availability. If you've been on shore for a while, then the warm up, then you're waiting for the start, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's something to pay close attention to, and it doesn't hurt to have a little snack or something with you in the boat in case your start is delayed and you have to wait. You don't want to run out of energy mid-race.
Yeah, and you don't have to eat it, so
Right.
just have it there. It gives you the choice. One thing I always take in my boat for head races is a plastic bag, an old-fashioned supermarket plastic bag, because you never know. Because if it does get super, super cold, or you have a deluge, you can put it over your handles and it'll keep your handles dry. Personally, I loathe rowing with wet handles.
Oh yeah, I hate that.
You can put it over your head as an improvised hat. You can put, you can keep your food in it. You can, if you want to have a warm top. So say the finish is a long way from where you boated, you can then put your warm top in there, knowing that it'll be dry when you finish your race and you've got dry kit to put on. So, for your paddle home. So just useful.
Yep.
Someone's asking here, how about 3 races in one day? Well, the same.
Same. Eat. Get
Yeah.
off the water and eat. Just eat and
rest your legs.
Yeah.
Stay off your legs.
Absolutely.
And I have done that actually. Bedford Head, which is a 2,000 kilometer. 2,000 kilometers. 2,000.
That's a long race. You're going to row to my house. Right?
They do 8 divisions in a day, and you can do multiple events. So yeah.
One thing I used to do when it rained, pogies that go over they're like little mittens. You can put them over your handles. Well, I used to knit my own out of rag wool because I didn't like baggy ones, and I liked little snug ones like mittens. So I used to have these rag wool pogies that are water repellent because of the oils in the wool. And when it was raining, I simply used to race with them. I just put them over my handles and keep my handles dry, because rowing with wet handles is the pits.
Yeah, it's challenging. Now, our second question has come in from Hanny, and he asks, regarding the paused finish, do you believe in it? I've done a lot of research, he says, about this, and I can't get a clear answer. Does it make a difference to the boat speed or not? So far, it's a split decision. Half people believe in it and half the people don't. Now, what he's describing is something that was popularized by Ginn, the Australian rower, which is in his pair, his Olympic pair. So let's establish the quality of this athlete. He and his partner take a tiny little pause at the finish with the blade out of the water before they extend their arms away and start their recovery. Right, Marlene, I'm going to put you on the spot. You go first. What do you think about the paused finish?
Well, I personally don't coach it that way. I coach more keeping the handle moving. I think I'm definitely not going to say that it's something that's necessarily wrong. I think you have to take Jürgen Grobler's advice, and I think you have to look at the athletes and look at the crew and see what works for them to help them make the boat go the fastest that they can make it go. Now, Ginn, when he talks about this, he specifically says that because of this slight pause at the finish, at the release, we have a quicker recovery time, but that means that you have to have very, very highly honed skills to put the blade in the water and to hit that catch timing. So he doesn't talk about this as a technique necessarily to teach novices from the approach that they used. I mean, they use this as a collection point to get together, and they're a little bit more dynamic on the recovery. Harry Parker used to use it with the Harvard men's crews and with the Harvard freshmen, but they did it as a timing drill. Get everybody together here so that they learn to start the release together. I think as they progressed through, if we have any Harvard rowers in the audience, they can chime in on this. But I think as they developed the oarsmen from year to year, they didn't necessarily do that. They started blending more, but it was used as a teaching method to get together people together as timing. I personally like to focus on the follow through position of, approaching one stroke cycle as completing with the arms and body away as the completion of one cycle and the beginning of the next cycle as the knees start to come up. And I know Rebecca goes a little bit maybe to like just slight bend in the knees. So we tend to focus moving more continuously around the release. With that said, I think you have to look at the individual athletes. And, Jürgen Grobler, if you read his book and what he talks about in interviews, he said every Olympic quarter, I coach the guys a little bit differently because every boat's a little bit different and they're not all the same and they don't all subscribe to exactly, they all need something a little bit different to make the boat go quickly. So I think as a coach, you have to, you have to look at your crew and see what works. I mean, it doesn't have to be, textbook rowing to make a boat go fast. Everybody's got a little bit of idiosyncrasies, as long as the overall qualities are there. So there's room for that, I think.
I agree with a lot of what Marlene said. One thing I would say in deciding for yourself what you want to do, and this is a theme of Faster Masters Rowing, is we try to give you ways that you can work out for yourself what works for you. In deciding for yourself, understand whether or not you can do this at race pace if you're a racing crew. Because if you can't do it at race pace, why the hell would you practice it at low rates unless, as Marlene's already said, you want to do it as a drill? There was a very good Canadian 8 that visited London to do a trial race against the Oxford and Cambridge crews 1 year before the boat race. And I'm hazarding a guess, it was around 2003-04. And when they paddled at low rate, steady state, their hand speeds were incredibly fast. And it looked odd. They didn't pause at all. They did the opposite. They were moving very fluidly from the oar extraction right through and onto the recovery. And then they were slow on the recovery. And it looked very odd. But when they were at race pace, it looked like they'd been moving their hands at a 34 kind of rate at paddling at 20, and it just looked fluid and fluent and completely normal. So that was at Mike Spracklin coach crew. And I would say you've got to work out for yourself, is this going to be a detriment for the thing that you're training for? If you're not training for anything, that doesn't matter. Then, it's neither here nor there. The only thing I will say is that if you occasionally row in singles and also in crew boats, be aware that your style and technique in your single may need adapting when you move into a crew boat, and that not everyone else can do what you can do.
I think that's a very good point, especially when somebody trains in a single, they go to a regatta, they're going to get into a team boat with someone else, and that team boat hopefully is moving much faster than you're accustomed to in your single. So you have to do some coordination exercises beforehand to bring your blade work up to speed. So there's where, like in your single, you could do some half slide work up at a higher rate, things like that, just to like feather and square earlier. Just to go back to the paused finish again. Sometimes when you watch a crew, it will look like they're pausing at the release, but they're not. Okay, there's a difference between a definite pause and sometimes it looks like they're taking their time, but it's not a pause. And sometimes I think that if a crew is very conscientious about trying to hold their suspension and make sure that they're very clean coming out of the water, sometimes it looks like a pause, even though their blade is still moving, but you're looking at their handle thinking it looks like they're paused because it looks like there's this sort of little moment of abeyance here. But actually, if you're watching their blade, they are doing something when this is happening. So I would say if their blade is moving out of the water, is it really a pause? I don't know. It's just, I think you just have to look at it with a critical eye. And, bottom line is come up with your own testing protocol, like Rebecca says, and try different techniques in your single or in your team boat, just like you would try different riggings. Have some go to CC protocol, that CC, when you want to try something, you go try this and you see if you go faster. You go try this and you see if you go faster. I think everybody has to have a little way to have some objective information of whether that improves your boat speed, because actually that's what you're after. If you go faster, that's okay.
Yeah, so measured distances on your regular rowing lake or river is what Marlene's talking about. When I was a student, there was a measured distance that for some reason was called a grind.
Oh.
So let's go do a grind today.
Oh dear.
Everyone knew it started at this point, it finished at that point, and then that gives you, as you say, the protocol that you can then test against and keep good records. Keeping my brain active is really important as I age. I enjoy researching new topics that enlighten, inspire, or just plain feed my curiosity. I think it's fun. Can you remember the one professor at university whose class was so popular? Students queued to get into their lectures. I'm inviting you to meet One Day University. It's a learning website where over 200 of these most popular professors are sharing their lectures. The teachers come from top schools across the USA, including Yale, Harvard, Columbia, and Duke. And classes cover history, politics, art, science, music, psychology, and lots more. So if you're curious about the culinary history of the USA, the science of happiness, or how the Beatles impacted 1960s popular culture, come to onedayu.com/rowing chat. You can learn online, or you can attend live streamed classes every week with live questions and answers with those favorite professors. Join the fun at onedayu, that's onedayu.com/rowing chat with a 14-day free trial. Fees start from $8.95 a month. Back to our questions and answers. And our next question is from a smaller rower. She says, I'm 5'2", I weigh 110 pounds. Is it better for me to elongate each phase of the drive in a more segmented fashion to make up a greater drive time? Or is it better to overlap these phases in a more simultaneous fashion? You've described each and I've videoed both styles, but which is best for a small-ish rower? Well, simultaneous versus sequential is really the big issue here. And it is the sort of thing that has been much debated and also which has changed a lot over the years. Rowing technique changes sometimes with boat equipment. So when they moved from wooden oars to carbon fiber oars that were stiffer, things change. And the thing about sequential versus simultaneous is, firstly, neither of them are uniquely separated. We have to blend our muscle groups through the power phase. So you've got three broad areas: legs, back, and arms. And my view is that what you do needs to work for you. So it's a little bit similar to our paused finish answer, is you've got to work out what works for you. Having said that, as a smaller rower, you want your drive time to be approximately 0.8 of a second. So your blade's under the water and actually connected with the water and actually pushing the water. And so if you are on the smaller side, I would tend towards coaching you to do a sequential movement. So you drive at least with just your legs for the first half of your leg drive, then maybe blend your back in and then your arms. Remember, particularly for us older women, our arms are really not strong. And you may want to test this for yourself. I used to be able to do chin-ups. I used to be able to do quite a lot of press-ups. And I no longer practice these When I do try and do them, I find that I have lost a lot of upper arm strength. So for me, blending my arms earlier than I might have done when I was younger is a change that I've made to my technique as I've aged. By contrast, very tall people with long limbs who are also strong can get away with sequential because they've got the physical length in their body that they can hold that drive power longer through the water. And in fact, if you watch very tall men and actually very tall women, when they're particularly in a crew, you may notice that they don't come to full compression, that their shins don't get fully vertical at the catch because they don't need to. So I would say that it may not be a satisfactory answer to you. You need to try both. And then you need to try both for a significant period of time, because it takes a while to bed in any changes like this before you make your decision.
I would agree with that. And to kind of build on what Rebecca says, you want to get that drive time period in the water. So you want to look at how you do that, how you can hold the water, doing it more sequentially so that you use your length to the best you're able to, given an effective zone, because you don't want to lay back so far in the boat that you don't have the time to get your body angle, and you don't want to overreach too far so that you're not effective getting things on the getting the power onto the blade. So looking at, but you do have a lot of room to work on the legs and then leverage into the back and then bring in the arm. So staying within an effective zone, you can do quite a bit to improve your length. You can also look at your rigging. And this is something we talked a lot about in the rigging webinar, but you can improve your drive time, which is, we want the blades to be in the water a certain amount of time. And this is where you can also, if you row in a single, adapt your rigging to help you gain some of that length. So it's a combination of your personal drive power application, as well as your rigging and your arcs, and how long you can certainly help yourself keep the blade in the water longer through your rigging too, with a little bit of research. So
I do think there's one part, particularly in 1K racing, where you might choose to row somewhat differently from your mid-race technique, and that's the racing start. In the racing start, your job is to get the boat up to speed really quickly, and often, as you know, we do short strokes, and that might be a moment where actually a simultaneous is a better application of power. So say you're at half slide or 3/4 slide, you actually might want to have a rather more aggressive first part of your power phase, and that the sequential may not suit you so well specifically for that part of the race. But again, something for you to experiment with and work out what works for yourself. It may just feel really odd, and you might find that it's way too much of a challenge to develop two different rowing styles that you then need to go from one to the other within the same race. Or you might say, no, that's the sort of challenge I enjoy, and I'd really like to try and train myself up, and let's see if I can get a faster start and more dynamic power, particularly in the short strokes, by trying something different.
Absolutely. Test, try things.
Test, measure, repeat. Our last question today is about opening our knees. So the question is, I have a long-standing sculling habit of opening my knees as I come to front stops, and I'm struggling to break it. Oddly, I don't have the same issue on the erg, so I can't work on it off the water in front of a mirror. I tried moving the foot position on the erg right up and not using the handle so I could open my arms as if I was in my scull, and my knees stayed in line. Any insights or tips on how to break the habit would be welcome.
I thought this was interesting. This is an interesting little challenge here in this question. Do you want me to put my 2 cents in first?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, my first thought when I was reading this is, okay, well, is this a flexibility issue? Is it a structural issue? For example, like the size of your hip socket to your femur could affect this. But since our faster master is able to do this on the erg, we know that it's not a structural question, and a physical structural issue, because that was my first thought. Then my second thought was, well, do some shadow rowing on the erg where you're going through the handle position and opening your hands, and our faster master tells us that that's already possible. Okay, so 2 strikes, right? So my next suggestion would be look at your foot stretcher adjustment in your boat and check that the distance between the bottom of the heels and the top of the seat matches what you row on the erg. That would be one thing I would check. I would also check the angle of your foot stretchers just to see if you can mimic what you have on your erg, because obviously on your erg everything's okay. If those things are all right, I would say take a water bottle or a Nerf ball and hold it between your knees while you row. Or take an elastic, like there you can buy those little elastics for doing things like monster walks and skate steps, walking side to side to strengthen your gluteus medius, which is the muscle. Like if you put your hands in your pockets, that's your gluteus medius, which is a hip stabilizer. If you don't have that muscle, when you weight your leg, your hip is going to collapse on you. But it's an important rowing muscle as part of the gluteal group. And one exercise you can do is you can buy, like from Amazon or any sports store, you can buy these elastics that you put around your knees, and you can walk with them doing skating steps, etc. And it helps you strengthen the outer part of your hips. You can put one of those elastics around your knees and just go row, and they're going to keep your knees, and you can get them in different shapes. Usually you buy them in a pack of 3. So you can get them in different shapes. So you could start out with one that's a little bit longer, so you're not, completely, shocking yourself. Just start out with one that just kind of keeps your knees a little bit more in alignment. And if that isn't all the way in, then after a while, try the next one. And just, if you can do it on the erg, you can do it in the boat. So that's what I would try. Another one is, like, some people, it does the same thing, but they put a water bottle between their knees, or a Nerf ball. They just hold something between their knees. But that's what I would try, because if it is a habit, it's just a habit. And maybe just first start rowing a little bit, just quarter slide, just start doing quarter slide, and see how it feels. Little by little, go to half slide. And
I certainly think that's something that's a very light reminder while you're rowing. Once you've established that you can do it, which, that's important first. Can you do this physiologically or not? If you can't, really don't worry about it. It's far better that you're rowing. And it is said that keeping your legs parallel is a better physiological posture to be in order to get a accurate and a driven stroke. And that is correct. But if you can make this base, try it. There are some people who put some warnings up about tying your legs together in the boat just in case you fall in. So have a mind to that. Right. But I think you could even use one of those sort of hair bands, or those long hair elastics that footballers use to keep the hair out of their eyes, because they're a little bit stretchy. Just something like that. That's just a light reminder for you, so you can feel it. Maybe wear shorts when you're rowing, so it's on your bare skin, and so you can just feel it when it tensions. But I do have one other observation which Marlene didn't mention, which is that the spacing apart of your shoes on the erg is a lot wider than in most rowing boats. And there's not very much you can do about that, because that is the way the ergs are designed and manufactured. But I would measure the width between your feet. And I certainly noticed for myself on the erg, I have one foot that skews off different than the other. And I find that in trying, this is something I learned from yoga, I try to keep the outside edge of my foot parallel with the side of the foot plate on the erg. I erg with no shoes on, so I can see very clearly where my feet are. And that, it's a little bit like, you know, when they talk about whether you pronate when you run, how your feet align, that my feet naturally sit slightly angled like that. And in fact, your shoes may be mounted like that in your sculling boat. Mm-hmm. And how you rest your feet naturally for you. For me, I naturally sit with my feet out like that. And then on the erg, curiously, one of them straightens up a little bit. So I have a kind of opposite habit. So I would look at what your natural tendency is before you spend a lot of energy trying to correct something that you may not need to correct. It may not be necessary, but you might be able to move your feet a little wider in the boat if that helps. And that might be that it is just a flexibility or a physiology thing, and that testing on the erg perhaps isn't the best thing for you to do. You probably just need to test it in the actual boat setup that you actually row with before you actually make your final decision as to whether or not you can break this habit.
Right. Well, I just thought it was curious that our faster master, because we don't know whether it's a he or a she, doesn't do this on the erg, so is able to drive with pretty straight alignment on the erg. So that's why it suggests, as we were saying, like it could be a positioning thing in your boat. So looking at spacing of your feet, the height, you know, if you're comfortable on the erg, can you mimic that in your boat and then take a look and see what's happening, and then, you know, kind of work backwards? Because if you can do it on the erg, you know, obviously your range of motion and your mobility is okay. So, because you wouldn't be able to do it on the erg if it wasn't. So, you know, your hip joint doesn't change, right? So, but I think your positioning, the positioning does.
Yeah. So it is a woman who's asking. So I'm not sure that changes our answer. I look forward to hearing how you go and how many times your tennis ball bounces out of the boat and into the river. Actually, that would be quite funny. It would make a good cartoon, you know, a sculler with a string of tennis balls in their wake.
Really big water bottles, right? So
well, you can get larger balls. There are sort of, you know, for kids play balls that are much larger than a tennis ball.
Like a Nerf ball, you know, that's those balls they're just like made of sponge, you know. And so they're very light, and it, like you said, it would be something that's just sort of a gentle cue, but it is going to activate those adductors, which are going to pull your knees together, because again, there could be a muscle imbalance, but I question this simply because it's okay on the erg versus the boat. So but anyway, experiment. But first, look at the positioning in the boat and see what you can do there, and if you can make some corrections. That would be my first thing to look at.
And if you go into a gym and you habitually do weights, also look at your foot positioning when you're doing squats and things like that, because you might find that habitually you have one foot maybe slightly in front of the other. So, you know, first understand what's normal for you. And that really brings us to the end of our Q&A session for today. Thank you to absolutely everybody who's sent in their questions. It's always a really nice challenge to get these very diverse things, which I know don't affect everybody, but we really enjoy it. So we'll do another one of these again sometime in the future. So this has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio, the show dedicated to masters athletes who want fun, fitness, and confidence in their rowing. You can become a student of the sport by buying a Faster Masters Rowing program subscription today at fastermastersrowing.com/join. We look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.